thanks for everyone who has joined us for the National Climate League Atlantic Region launch. Tonight we're going to hear from three great presenters that come from the local area, and then I'm just going to give a quick introduction first to the National Climate League. So, got to make sure I can advance my presentation here. There we go. So I'm going to give a introduction to the National Climate League results from Atlantic Canada. I'm Brenna Walsh, the regional organizer for the Community Climate Hub, which is part of the Climate Reality Project Canada. It's the initiative to get citizens together to start municipal climate action groups, just trying to push their municipalities to go further. And we're working on launching some hubs in Atlantic Canada. So after I do that little introduction, we're going to move on to a focus on affordable housing with Justin Quigley, who's the Affordable Housing Working Group lead with the Urban Development Action Team at the Ecology Action Center. Then look at a little bit about local agriculture with Josh Bolton, who is one of the members of Taproot Farms, and then a little focus on electric vehicles and how Atlantic Canada is doing, Atlantic Canadian cities are doing in electric vehicle uptake and infrastructure with Kurt Sampson, who's with the Electric Vehicle Association of Atlantic Canada. So just to start with a little bit of an introduction on what the National Climate League is. So this is a report that is released annually by the Climate Reality Project Canada, which is a benchmarking of different municipalities kind of against each other and over time. So the standings measure the performance of municipalities across Canada on 30 sustainability indicators, 15 primary indicators, and 15 kind of additional indicators, such as air quality, public transit, affordable housing. And then it ranks which cities are thriving in each of these areas, looking at large-sized cities, medium-sized cities, and small-sized cities across the country. And then citizens can then use this data to advocate for local change and better quality of life by lobbying their municipal councillors to ensure change in their communities. This local level of action is and different instruments for citizens to be able to engage are oftentimes left out, and there's little way for engagement. So this is a really great way for citizens to be able to really push for change. And it really highlights the importance of the data-driven and kind of science-based advocacy and action. And it also promotes some fun competitions between municipalities. So it's fun to check out how your city was doing, say in the 2 years ago against how they're doing in the standings this year. And so how do we get this data into the hands of citizens? So one of the interesting things about the National Climate League, from my perspective, is that the data one of the main, you might think you might be looking for this data by digging through municipal websites, but one of the things that is really promoted in data collection is that citizens reach out to municipal councillors and city staff to ask them to provide the data directly. So if you're looking for particular statistics, say on air quality in your city, asking the municipality to provide that data to the citizens and submit that directly into the data tracker. And that is a really good way to let councillors, city staff, people in your municipality know that these data are really important to citizens. People are wondering about them, people are wondering how this is progressing, and to really push for further engagement and really see that these ground up initiatives are coming through. And if that isn't working out, you can do that kind of digging method, but then you also if that's what you do, kind of go and find data by yourself as a citizen that's been released by the municipality, you have to get that data certified by a councillor or city staff to ensure that is the correct data that they would be reporting as well. And so this data collection can be done year-round, but there's actually an annual data collection push at the fall of every year. And this data collection can be led by community climate hubs if there is one in your area, but it can also be done kind of at the individual level. And we also promote hubs kind of asking their friends and networks to continue to ask for this data using the templates that are provided to really, again, elevate the concern of citizens on these topics. So, and then every year the Climate Reality Project Canada puts together this report, which is released each February. So we're looking here at the results of the 2020 report. So I just wanted to show this nice graphic. You can see that each city that has a fairly big presence in the Climate Hub initiative is reported against these different indicators that you can see on the right. And just to highlight, you can look at these different cities and see how they're doing against different indicators. So you see the 2020 winners in yellow. If a city hasn't kind of won in any category, but it's always good to note the city's strengths, that would be in green, and their weaknesses are in red. So we're going to look at a couple of those, pull a couple of those things out for Atlantic Canada. Just to give an example of Halifax, you can see that there were two indicators that Halifax was the winner here. They're a little bit hard to see, but we can see that that is in local agriculture and landfill waste. So that is ranked against numbers that come from other small or medium-sized cities. I believe Halifax is ranked. And then one of the ones that Halifax has kind of done the poorest on is in terms of electric vehicles. So we'll see that we've highlighted a couple of the areas that Halifax and other municipalities in Atlantic Canada are doing well to look at tonight, and then maybe one that there's a lot of room for improvement, but it looks like things are starting to come along. And so we did get some results from Atlantic Canadian cities. The data was collected from Fredericton, Moncton, St. John's, Newfoundland, Halifax, and Charlottetown, which I'm not sure why it doesn't have its own line. Sorry to anyone from Charlottetown. And we got some data on a variety of different indicators. So along the list of primary indicators, we saw some data come in on affordable housing, air quality, kilometers of bike lanes, EV charging stations, how many B corporations are in each city, how walkable cities are, public transit, shared vehicles, tree canopy, landfill waste, and number of sustainable buildings. So those are just a good indicator of the types of data that we're kind of tracking and looking for. I believe this is the next slide. Oh no, okay. So I'll just mention this again in a minute, but one thing, it's great to see kind of this list of indicators and cities that we have this data on, but all of these showing in a couple of slides. It is actually the data that is collected is actually accessible throughout the year to citizens as well. So not only can you look at the data from this year in this report, you can also go back a few years and see different data that's been collected and compare how your city is improving, or see that no data maybe has been collected on this indicator, and it's really hard for citizens to understand how the city is doing in that area. So just looking at a couple of examples of some of the types of indicators we see. So air quality is one that's measured just a little bit more basically across all cities in Canada. So this is just measured by the number of smog days a year. So you can see that Halifax does quite well on this, but Quebec City was actually the winner in this category. They have only one smog day, Halifax having two. Some other cities, which I believe are primarily affected by wildfires that are up on the higher end, are Edmonton, Vancouver, and Calgary. So you can see how that kind of ranks through the year. So again, looking at, as I mentioned, Halifax has these areas that it's done well, local agriculture and landfill waste, but needs improvement on the EV charging side. So we can see that we received kind of the most data this year from Halifax. We're hoping to see some increases in data from the cities, particularly in New Brunswick, as we got some more data from them than we had in past years, and really hope to kind of build up some action and ambition there. So if you look closely, just to take a look at what some of these indicators look like. So it gives a little bit of a background on why this indicator is important. Some of them are really obviously related to kind of climate mitigation and adaptation. Some of them are a little bit more subtle. So it gives a little bit of the context of why that is, why the winning city is doing well, and a little bit of an example of a successful city. And each indicator has some kind of fun graphics here too as well. You can see that there's very few trash bags here in Halifax. Up in the cities that haven't done as well, in this medium-sized city category, Regina and Saskatoon, you can see there's quite a few more trash bags. So some of those are fun and good for sharing on social media and that sort of thing. But one interesting thing that's also tracked, each indicator is also mapped onto the Sustainable Development Goals. So you can see that this landfill waste indicator has implications in the Clean Water and Sanitation Goal, number 6, Responsible Consumption and Production, number 12, as well as Life on Land, number 15. So it can be mapped against some other kind of indicators of development and equity and that sort of thing as well. And so just to take a quick look at some of the other graphics and information that you can pull out from this, I'll go over these pretty quickly. So sustainable jobs we see here in the middle, that Charlottetown in the small city category has been ranked here. It's one of the lower rankings in number of sustainable jobs in the city. And again, here Halifax is also present, also one of the lower ranked cities. Looking at kilometers of bike lanes, Halifax actually also does pretty well in terms of the medium-sized cities, but I think compared against some of the larger cities per capita, the number of bike lanes isn't as high. And then we have Charlottetown as well on this one. So you can see that they have a fairly low number of kilometers of bike lanes per capita. Oh, we got that slide twice. And just this is the last thing I wanted to show. This is the stat tracker that I had mentioned. So you can look at, this is just an example of different values of affordable housing that we have for different cities. You can see that you might be able to, we kind of comparing just affordable housing in values here. You can see the different population information that was collected and the average rental prices here. So you can look this up by indicator, you can look things up by city, you can kind of compare the indicators across a year by city or by cities within the province. So that's something that's really interesting to be able to look at and pull out additional information than is just seen in the report. As I mentioned, Halifax is the only city that's kind of highlighted within the report from Atlantic Canada, but there is quite a bit more data that you can pull out and then also just sort of see where the data is lacking in Atlantic Canadian cities and really think about how we can collect more data next year. And so now we're going to move on to feature presentation about one of the indicators. And so we can see here that in affordable housing, saw that some of the smaller cities did pretty well in this indicator in Atlantic Canada. This is a little bit hard to read, but Charlottetown and Fredericton are on the lower end of the increase in housing price for smaller cities, and Halifax is sort of in the middle in terms of medium-sized cities. This is an indicator that I think is particularly important here in Halifax and in other cities right now. There's a lot of changes that have been going on, some of which have been happening for quite some time, some of which have been exacerbated due to the situation in the last year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Justin to talk a little bit about affordable housing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brenna. Yes, again, my name is Justin Quigley. As mentioned, I'm the chair for the Affordable Housing Working Group that's hosted under the Ecology Action Center. I've been doing research in Halifax for about 2 years on affordable housing, so by no means would I necessarily call myself an expert, but certainly I was excited to have the opportunity to talk about what we're seeing in Halifax when it comes to affordable housing. To talk about the context of affordable housing in 5 to 10 minutes is a little bit tricky, so I am going to be running really, really quickly through a brief history of how we kind of got to where we are, as well as highlighting some of our recent successes and what are some of the kind of takeaways that I think you can bring to your own municipalities across Atlantic Canada. But I am obviously going to be omitting quite a bit of content, and there may be a bunch of different questions that you might have. So I left my email on this slide. I'd encourage you to write it down if you have any questions that we don't quite get to at the end of the webinar. I'd be happy to field any questions or do some looking up on anything that I don't know immediately. So in this presentation, I'm really going to try and focus on some of our successes that we've seen in Halifax. Obviously, we have seen some really good things over the last couple of years, as well as we've seen some challenges. But I really wanted to highlight some of those big things that have happened that are really quite positive in Halifax. And so that's kind of the frame that I'm taking for this presentation. Next slide, please, Brenna. So let's get the good figured out first here. So yeah, as was mentioned in the 2020 standings, it looks like we're actually doing relatively well compared to Canadian cities, especially in the middle size tier. And these are 3 of the big things that I wanted to pull out directly that I thought was a real advantage of what Halifax has here. First off, we're actually seeing quite an increase in the overall just general stock of affordable housing, which is really good because this was assessed a couple of years ago as being a major problem within Halifax itself. And so seeing that we're actually moving on building new affordable housing units is a really good thing that we're hoping to see is going to continue to propel us forward in terms of good standings in affordable housing. We also, I would say, quite recently, but over quite a few years, we have a council that is quite receptive to housing issues. And I think this is important because we're seeing a lot of decision making happening that is responsive to the needs of affordable housing. And that's something that I think is important to highlight, because you don't want to omit the fact that without a good council, it's really hard to kind of get anything done. So I think that's a really good positive here as well. We've also seen the rate of increase in terms of housing costs has been in decline over the last couple of years, though you see that I put an asterisk on here because as I'm sure everyone is aware, through this last year under the pandemic, this has really messed up the housing market quite a lot. And so we're going to kind of have to see what happens in the next couple months because of just the boom that's happened in the real estate market, and how that's going to affect affordable housing is still kind of up in the air. So stay tuned on that, I think, in the 2021 standings. Next slide, please. Now, granted, we do have a couple things that we're still really struggling to deal with. The two big ones that I wanted to highlight that sort of sets the tone here is, first of all, this article that you see in the Global News is sort of the poignant piece of, yes, though we have housing prices that are decreasing, it's still quite unaffordable for many marginalized communities, as well as people who are in core housing need. So while we're getting better, we're still not quite there in terms of sort of making housing across Halifax as an affordable option for many families. And this is especially true in the urban core, which is very similar in a lot of cities across Canada, but is something that's really quite pertinent, I think, in Halifax. The other one that I wanted to highlight is that we have a very sticky relationship between the province and the municipality in terms of who controls what with affordable housing. And that gets to making policy decisions or just general decisions on affordable housing really, really tricky, because neither really wants to step on each other's toes. And so I think the positive side of that is as a result of these challenges, there's a lot of opportunities to get creative with how we can affect affordable housing, particularly in Halifax. And again, that kind of gets back to having a receptive council that's willing to go that extra step to try and figure out how can we actually solve this problem. Next slide, please. So I added this slide into here almost a little bit for myself, because this is something that I've been really thinking about a lot recently through our working group. Is, you know, we talk about affordable housing and we kind of often take it for granted that it might be a sustainability issue, but that tie is kind of tricky. So I just wanted to bring up a couple really good quotes that I found to really highlight why I think it's really important to talk about affordable housing as a sustainability issue. The first one I really wanted to highlight in particular, the fact that 1/3 of Canadian households live in inadequate housing. Inadequate housing effectively means that it's housing that is becoming dilapidated or is at a standard that is generally unsuitable for good living conditions. And that's often a really significant challenge within the sustainability lexicon, because a lot of these buildings that are dedicated affordable housing units are often really bad in terms of emissions, in terms of good internal heat, all those kind of things. And they often don't have the technologies that we're now kind of seeing in sustainable construction. And so that's kind of something that's really needing to be addressed, I think, in affordable housing, is when we look to build better stock, we also have to be really concerned about what kind of sustainability practices are we putting into them. The second quote as well, I really wanted to highlight because I think it really gets at the crux of the issue with affordable housing living conditions, in that many of these affordable housing communities are often put in cheaper land areas, which is generally outside of the city core, outside of areas that have good amenities and whatnot. So there's a lot of extra costs that kind of come up because of that, which really don't help towards maintaining GHG emissions and all of those kind of things. And then finally, the demand for new housing stock is expected to continue. I see that as an opportunity. If we have to build new units, we may as well be doing it sustainably. So those are kind of the three things that I've wrapped my head around currently, I suppose, in terms of affordable housing as a sustainability issue. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind when talking about affordable housing. Next slide, please. So we're going to blow through a recent history of affordable housing in Halifax. The big things that I wanted to talk about here, I think that were really important towards the 2020 standings, is we've had a recent history of a lot of advocacy groups going out and putting the work in. And by putting the work in, I mean, they've gone and collected the data directly. They've done a lot of really good work in terms of identifying what are those actual problems that we're seeing in the HRM, what do those actually look like, how do we write those out? And then in that regard, same vein, taking a look at what kind of solutions can we hopefully try to take on some of these problems that we're seeing in order to attempt to address this problem. And interestingly, what happened within these advocacy groups is they all actually got together and created the Housing and Homelessness Partnership, which is a very important group, I think, in HRM, and is also a formal decision-making body. It's recognized by HRM as being able to direct policy, and a lot of the work that they do actually does go directly to regional council. So it's a really important group in terms of leading the charge in affordable housing in HRM, because it is both advocacy-led as well as municipally led. And I put down in particular the development of the housing needs assessment, which is a document from 2015. I would say if there's any single document that you need to read to kind of get yourself up on the state of affordable housing in Halifax, this would be the one. It's really, really comprehensive in terms of what are those issues that are coming up, what are we seeing in terms of the data that we're developing, and what are those core target needs that we need to be addressing, which have been adopted by regional council. And so we're slowly working towards addressing some of those problems that are in this document itself. Next slide. Next slide, please, Brenna. Thank you. So what is the results? We have seen, as a result of having this Housing and Homelessness Partnership and a responsive council, we've seen new reports built in recent years on varying dynamics within affordable housing. It's a very broad topic. We've seen more stock. You can see a lot of articles on this slide about just generally we're building a lot of new affordable housing units, especially in recent months. So that's really, really positive. We're also seeing councillors directly, Way Mason, taking direct charge on affordable housing and really identifying that this is a problem and we need to be addressing. So it's really nice to see the decision makers actually taking this on, even to the point where in the throne speech we've heard Rankin, the province of Nova Scotia, saying that affordable housing is a core issue that they want to be addressing. But all of this just kind of to show that it's a talking point right now. It is a priority. It's something that is being brought into the overall lexicon that's happening in the Halifax conversation. And it's really good to see that affordable housing is being discussed right now. You kind of have to identify your problems in order to actually make some solutions happen here. So I think we've got a really good atmosphere right now in Halifax in terms of actually discussing the issue. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and if you can just take maybe 1 minute to go through the lessons learned, Justin, that would be great.
Yes, for sure.
I think we just want to keep tight on time.
Yeah. So in terms of lessons learned, these are some of the big things. I tried to boil them down into something that's practicable across different options, both in terms of affordable housing as well as other advocacy groups. Advocates, they do lead the charge in terms of making affordable housing an important topic. They were the ones who put the work in. They were the ones who did the research. And I think that's a really important first step that led to an opportunity to actually get a municipality that is responsive. And it has been leading into change and collaborating. Collaborating is so important in this work, because often when you do this work, it leads to confusion. There's misinformation. There's someone researching this and someone researching that, and it's getting to, it really muddies the waters in terms of a clear, concise, what are we needing to get done. Next slide, please. The other things that I was thinking about is just the overall timeline. It's taken a lot of time for us to actually get to where we are now. It's not an immediate, here we go, we've got these problems, let's make these solutions happen, and it's done. It's been taking quite a few years. And so in that vein, a lot of the strategies, they have to be flexible, because as things change over time, you're going to get left fielded by a bunch of different things. And so it's really important to have these strategies, yes, but to make sure that you're flexible when you're working on them. The other part of it is the work is never done. We've seen a bit of a pause in terms of the research that's occurred in Halifax, and that kind of allows these new and old problems to sort of fester and grow again. And so it kind of feels like we're back in this point of playing catch up. So it's really important not to just stop. So just in terms of, where are we at now with it? I wanted to leave you with a really good quote from Kevin Hooper from the United Way Halifax. I think this is a really good quote because it shifts the conversation from what is our product to what is the holistic approach around affordable housing. And I think that's a really valuable tool in order to think about how we need to continue moving forward with affordable housing. And I think that's a really good option when trying to address affordable housing in your own municipality. Again, we kind of ripped through everything really, really quickly. So if you have any questions, my email is there. I'd encourage everyone to get in touch. Thanks, Brenna.
Yeah, thanks very much, Justin. That was really great. And so we're going to have some time for questions with the three presenters after all three are presented. But now we're just going to move on to Josh, who's going to talk about local agriculture. So this is the National Climate League infographic for the local agriculture. Kind of this neat apple here that you can see, but you can see that Halifax actually has the one of the highest numbers of farmers markets per capita, and that is a really interesting indicator to see how. But I think there's a really interesting indicator to think about. But I think that this will support lots of different other. This has lots of different other contexts from how the interaction between the urban and rural within Nova Scotia and within Atlantic Canada plays out, as well as some other farming methods that can be really used to really increase our potential for greenhouse gas mitigation or sequestration. So I think I'll just turn it right over to Josh, and we can hear from him of what he's up to at Taproot Farms.
Thank you. Let me just start sharing here. All right, this slideshow is just going to kind of run randomly as I'm speaking, just to give everybody something to look at. So my name is Josh Holton, and I'm here at Taproot Farms in Port Williams, Nova Scotia. I farm here with my wife, Patricia Bishop, and up to 30 other farmers that come from locally and Newfoundland and also Jamaica. Also, I have embarked on a Nuffield Scholar, and I have traveled the world studying flax production, seed to shirt. For us, we've done well in Halifax. I find Halifax is a really unique place in the world around local food. We are very close to a great growing area of the Annapolis Valley, where we can grow. I always say A to Z, apples to zucchini, and everything in between. There's not a lot we can't grow. I haven't tried bananas or oranges lately, but we certainly can feed Nova Scotia with from the bounty of Nova Scotia, from the bounty of the Annapolis Valley. In terms of the farmers markets, as you saw in that first slide, there is lots of farmers markets in Halifax and then really in every town in Nova Scotia. But what isn't known is that there is a huge competition to get into those farmers markets. And there's a lot of people that want to grow vegetables and are growing vegetables. And we, as small farmers, are kind of pushed towards those farmers markets. And these slides are running really fast. Sorry for the distraction, but anyway, they're good slides and they'll keep going. So if you want to see it again, it'll come around again. So I find oftentimes when I speak about farmers markets and I tell people the amount of competition within the growers, it's quite shocking, because we really are all fighting for the same kind of market share. So I guess where my thought on that is that yes, we're doing really well in the context of how many farmers market we have, but still we aren't capturing a lot of the potential customers. Like I wish I had some more kind of figures for you, but the sense of the producers is that there's only a small percentage of people who actually go to the farmers markets, and so then we're constantly kind of fighting amongst ourselves to get people to choose our potatoes or our leeks. So what we have done on our farm to sort of move away from farmers markets, we do go to farmers markets, but as you saw in that last picture, 2 pictures ago, we do a community supported agriculture, and most of our customers are within that Halifax region. So that basically what that is that you can share the bounties of the farm with us by becoming a member. I'm trying to grasp for a word there. Subscription, I suppose some people would call it, but we call everybody members. And so you sign up and you get a box of fruit and vegetables from our farm, and you can also add meat and eggs to that offering. There's a picture of some of the boxes. I think that another interesting set of statistics that I saw lately was coming out of the Nova Scotia government, and it was looking at all the different commodities that we produce and what we bring in. And it was really quite shocking to see most things are in single digits. Like, for example, the low one that I was shocked at was pork. We only produce 2% of what we eat in Nova Scotia. And then on the high ones, there's of course apples and onions, and of course we are right on the 100% mark on the quota or the supply managed commodities like feather. So I don't know if everyone knows about supply managed system, but there's 2 categories that have a supply managed system, and that's feather, so that means eggs, turkey, broiler, all that stuff, anything that has a feather, obviously, and then milk. So that is right on. So we produce exactly what we need, and very little import, very little export. And I mean, that is the way to go. But of course, there's only so many things we can have supply managed on because of the World Trade Organization. But it would be so great to bring some of those lower numbers up, like pork, and so it kind of leads into the interest of local in Nova Scotia is really great, but again, the numbers are really low, and it would be really great to push those numbers up. And I'm not sure how to do that. We struggle with that as an industry to figure that out. So there's a lot of agricultural products like apples, for example, are all shipped away, exported away. The blueberries that we grow here are all exported away, and those lands could be used to diversify our crops here in Nova Scotia, so we could have more pigs out on pasture. I think that kind of, again, this quick, like Justin was saying, that to touch on agriculture in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but that's sort of what I see as what's going on in the production, the marketplace in Nova Scotia. I hope that makes sense. Another thing I just wanted to touch on, and was really great, was this time last year, I mean, it was all about local. and we had a huge boom in online, and just like we could not keep up with people wanting to buy local meat, local vegetables. Like we just were run off our feet trying to keep up. Everybody else was locked down and shut down, and we were just like the busiest we've ever been. And so fast forward it to today, and that has dropped probably 80%, and that probably started dropping in the first of the spring, and which wasn't surprising, but also very disappointing. That there's so much when it's like when shit hits the fan, they come to us, and then once it's over, it's like, oh well, we'll go back to eating that stuff that is brought in on trucks. And so anyway, that's my little rant on that. Just a little bit about carbon farming on our farm. First, I'll tell a story about, we bought this farm in 2004. And when we first started to farm this land, we could not get a crop. And I didn't know a lot about farming. I was right out of fairly new out of college, hadn't done a lot of management of land before. And I was just like, what is going on? I'm following all the rules. I plant, I fertilize, I spray, I do all these things, and still no crop. And so I was just searching for something to help me. And so I was trying different fertilizers and different seeds. And so finally, someone invited me to go to a soil food web seminar locally. And that's when it clicked for me, and to think about the soil as, the life underneath it, the biology of the soil. And so from there on, we bought a farm that was organic, and it's been organic since before organic was cool. And I just couldn't believe the activity in the soil, and the tilth of the soil, and the health of the soil, and the health of the plants. So that's when we decided to then start transitioning everything that we're doing into organic production. And so we have taken that approach since now probably 10 years now. And most of our lands are certified organic. And again, we're just constantly trying to add organic matter into our system, so that we can build up that carbon in our soil that can hold nutrients, that can hold moisture, that facilitates some really great biology, so that then all the little bugs, like I don't even know what they all do. I mean, I know fungi and protozoa and bacteria, like I know all the big words, but I don't think anybody really knows what's happening inside all the relationships. But they do know that there's a lot of, the fungi and the bacteria then make nitrogen. They eat the organic matter, or they consume the organic matter, and they release nutrients. And so as you can see, a lot of these pictures have animals on our land. We've incorporated animals in probably the last 6 or 7 years. There's still lots of work to do. And that also just kind of closes that nutrient gap. And so we don't have to buy so many nutrients from away. We have tried to reduce our tillage. And this is all in terms of carbon farming. I mean, obviously we're not organic. We're not using a lot of imported nitrogen that is really hard on the soil, or sprays that break down the soil and release carbon. So, I mean, that is sort of where we are. I don't know where I'm at for time, if I've talked really quickly or...
I think we're pretty close to time, so if you can maybe just start to wrap up. But yeah, that's one of the really, really interesting topics that I've dove into too in the last year or two, just learning about carbon farming. So it's really great to hear about that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess in closing, I mean, moving forward, we're just going to keep trying. We really want to get to a no-till system, because tillage is really degrading our soil. I mean, some people say we only have 60 harvests left because of how terrible agriculture is on our land. It seems kind of counterintuitive to think that that is what's happening, but I mean, dragging that steel through the ground 3 or 4 times a year is really hard on our soils. And so no-till situations are great. I did hear someone say, talking about no-till, and they actually didn't like the phrase because it's really, in most cases, it's just a term for a particular activity and not a whole holistic approach to farming. So we would like to do no-till, but in a all-around kind of farming method. So thank you for listening to me talk about my farm, our farm.
Thanks, Josh. That was really great. And I think we can switch over to Kurt. And I won't stick the slide up about the electric vehicles in Atlantic Canada because we'll just move right into Kurt's presentation. But you can see that that is one of the indicators that we have not done as well on. So I think Kurt is going to be able to talk about some context within Halifax and Nova Scotia, as well as maybe a couple other cities in Atlantic Canada as well, and just see where we are and where we're hoping to go, maybe in terms of electric vehicles and infrastructure. And turn it over to you, Kurt.
Okay, thanks, Brenna. So I feel kind of like the party pooper where you guys did good and I'm coming in talking about where we did bad with electric vehicles, but I promise it's kind of a good moving forward story. So I'm representing the Electric Vehicle Association of Atlantic Canada. I can't. There we go. I can forward my slides, just not with the forward button. Quickly, a little bit about me. I work in IT at Dal for about 20 years. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids, 6 and 9. I've been a volunteer at the David Suzuki Foundation for quite a while. I've been an EV owner since 2015. So I've had 3 complete, when I say EV, that's complete battery electric vehicles. I had a couple of hybrids before that, and I kind of grew up on a dealership out of my yard. So I have a lot of auto experience. And I'm the co-founder and chairman of the Electric Vehicle Association of Atlantic Canada. I put my little tagline that I always have on my emails down below because I think it says a lot about why I do sort of these things, is that I believe that we have responsibility to our children and to the future to be sustainable. A little bit quickly about the Electric Vehicle Association. So we're just a little over 3 years old, 100% volunteer run. Not all just EV owners. We say owners and enthusiasts. So, anybody is welcome if you're interested in the topic. We have about 500 owners across Nova Scotia right now. Maybe double that across all the Atlantics. Finding exact numbers is tricky. And our mission is to accelerate the transition to clean electric transportation. I've listed on this slide some things that we do, like raising awareness, bringing the cars, putting the electric vehicles in front of people because they are hard to find. We host educational workshops. We work with community organizations like the EAC and in many others, CAA. We work with industry, auto dealers, charger manufacturers. We work with all level of governments to promote electric transportation. We have national partners and we're working on an international network right now. And, we do fun stuff too. It's a community. And like I mentioned, anyone you don't have to be an owner. EVAC is for anyone who's interested at all in electric vehicles. This is a few pictures just to highlight some of the things we do, like that one with a lot of people at the top was our 2nd year anniversary event. We've been at the launch of new chargers, the launch of new electric vehicles. Lately, down in the bottom corner, we're trying to keep our distance, and mostly we've been like we are now on computer screens, but we're hoping to get back to in-person stuff soon. Some of our partners that we work with that I mentioned, dealerships, CAA is a close partner, Next Ride with Clean Nova Scotia, All EV is the only electric all electric vehicle dealerships that are around here. There's one in here, and there's also one in PEI. And then sort of go into a bigger perspective why electric vehicles are important in the overall sustainability picture. These are some stats. It's from US, you know, it's easier to find US stats, and these are 2018, but you can see by sector, transportation is huge when it comes to GHG emissions. It's actually the biggest sector that, you know, that we've divided out. And inside that, you know, you might think that it's like, you know, airplanes or whatever that are the worst, but the light duty vehicles, so the stuff that we drive, the cars that we drive around, that represents actually the biggest chunk of our emissions. So if what we can do to clean up our transportation emissions, particularly light duty vehicles, really could make a big difference. And one way we can clean up our transportation emissions is to electrify. So I got some quotes here and some graphs, again, from US stats, and it looks like my graphics covering over the link there. I'll fix that before I share them out. But EVs really are cleaner. You'll hear misinformation about it that maybe they're not, but they are, and they are almost everywhere. You know, people know we burn coal here in Nova Scotia. We do. They're still cleaner here. Actually, my next slide is a few years old, but this is based on data straight from Nova Scotia that shows that like a BEV, a battery electric vehicle, or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, that's the next line, or even a regular hybrid, they're all cleaner than their fossil fuel equivalents, even in Nova Scotia, even 6 years ago, because these are figures from 2015. Our grid's gotten cleaner, and it is going to get cleaner. So that's one of the great things about EVs. They get cleaner. Like the dirtiest kilometer probably you're going to drive is your first one, and they get cleaner as you own them. Yeah, there we go. I forgot that I had a whole slide about that. And fossil fuel vehicles, they just get dirtier because we need to get more oil in harder to find places. So we're drilling in the Arctic, and we're, you know, trying to find oil in rainforests and digging up there. So as we install more solar and any wind, we have great tidal potential around here. So we're hoping to see some action there. And, you know, I think we're maxed out at wind right now, but we're really building the renewables. And I know we have targets provincially to be 80% by 2030. So that'll really make EVs very clean. In addition to that, there's, you know, in addition to the climate concern, there's also health concerns. I think, honestly, that we're going to look back at the time of driving fossil fuel vehicles, kind of like a lot of us look back at the time when we used to smoke everywhere, you know, with our kids in the car, and you'd go out and you'd smell like smoke every day. I think we're going to look back at fossil fuel cars that way. They literally do spew out poisons in front of our kids, and also contribute to climate change. Some studies recently, I quote at the bottom there, every EV on the road can be contributed to about $10,000 in positive reduction in health costs. So, you know, that would be a good reason why government should want to also promote these. Also, their EVs are very safe. You may hear other misinformation, like they're going to catch on fire or something like that, but they're actually very unlikely to catch on fire. They have almost every EV has a super low center of gravity. They have a huge crumple zone up front because you don't have a big engine. And because EVs are in the technology sphere, the safety technology that's built into them is setting the bar for everybody. So they're the safest cars on the road. And not to mention they're like the performance is incredible, insane, ludicrous, I think is the word now. Actually, plaid is the newest word. You have all of your torque from start. You can tow with ease. You can actually the one pictured here, this has not hit the road yet, but I mean, this is essentially a $300,000 car, which is not cheap, but this one will blow every record that are held currently by multi-million-dollar cars. But I don't think there's anyone arguing that the performance of electric vehicles is anything but but amazing. One thing I want to talk a little bit about was charging, especially because the study, the metrics that were used is about charging availability, and there's some lingo in the talking about charging too. Essentially, with an EV, you can charge anywhere. You can charge at home. You can plug into a 110. It's going to take a while, but pretty much every day you leave with. I usually just charge to 90, but you leave with a full tank every day, so you rarely need to charge anywhere else, anyways. So it's not like we're going to see the amount of gas stations that are out there. We don't need nearly that amount of EV chargers, because you just don't need 90% of your charging's at home. This is a quick map from PlugShare that shows you where the chargers are around here. So if you don't have an EV, you might not notice them, but there are quite a few. The different color ones are different speeds, of course, and I could talk about that more, but I'm going to try to go quickly through this. Your charger at home, it's just like installing a clothes dryer. It's a 220 volt outlet. So it's, and maybe $500 to $1,500, and you're set up and you have, basically your own gas station at home. And charging on the road looks something like this, with my kids sitting there eating a snack. You pull up, you stop for 15, 20 minutes when you're on a long trip, which is, for most people, the rare long trip. But it's no big deal, and it's only getting faster. You save a lot on maintenance and operating costs driving an electric car. Far fewer moving parts. That little graphic there is from one of the training sessions we did. Like, that's literally that's everything in an electric vehicle right there. The motors are in between the wheels, the batteries along the bottom. There's no exhaust, there's no belts and rings, and there's so much that's not there that you normally have to take care of and maintain in a fossil fuel vehicle. So on the municipal side of things, we have a Halifax 2050, which is a goal, a bunch of goals along a lot of different areas that the city of Halifax has set out to reach. And in the electric vehicle sphere, they've stated that by 2030, they would like to see 100% of new vehicle sales be electric, which would be huge. That's awesome. That's a very ambitious goal. We're going to try to help us get there, or as close to there as we can. Price is obviously a barrier. The solution is, it's not actually more expensive to drive an EV over the whole life of the car. It's just more expensive up front. And purchase incentives is what's going to be the solution to that. Nova Scotia just announced a provincial incentive program a couple weeks ago, which is awesome. We're now one of 3 provinces that have that right now, I believe. And it's on top of the federal program. One of the barriers is the supply, and legacy dealerships don't have an incentive to want you to switch to electrics. One of the major solutions to that is what we like call a zero emission vehicle mandate. So that would be a rule that would require dealerships to at least sell a small minimum that we would increase. That'll put more available to people who want to buy them. Residential chargings can be a barrier if you live in a multi-unit residential building. Getting a charger installed right now, retrofitting one can be a little more expensive. We're working to try to implement rules that would have new buildings come ready to have EV chargers installed, and to make it so that people can do retrofits reasonably. Cold weather is a thing that you'll have to hear about cars. It's not really that big a deal if there's a few tricks to get around it. And there's a lot of misinformation about EVs. That's one of our biggest barriers, and that's one of the biggest things that EVAC can do to help. So, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Great. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much. That was super interesting and good to hear what is going on around Atlantic Canada. I'm just going to go really quickly. So I just put in the chat that if people are able to stay on a little bit longer, we will try and have a little bit of additional time for questions. So it is getting close to the top of the hour. So if people are able to stay on for another maybe we'll try for another 15 or 20 minutes of questions. So Laura, if you want to turn on your mic and just, Laura is going to ask some of the questions to the panelists that have been put in the Q&A or the chat section. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, if there are any questions that don't get answered, if we don't get to, we'll try to see if we can have some of the panelists answer those questions, and we'll include them. We'll be able to try and send them out to the questioner in the coming days.
Okay, thanks, Brenna. Thanks, everybody. Those were great presentations. I'm Laura White, climate reality leader here in Halifax. I see some of the questions have been answered online, so I'll go right to the ones that that haven't been touched on yet. And the first one is kind of a joint about affordable housing, local agriculture, and maybe aimed at Brenna first here, because it's talking about, is there a better way beyond the National Climate League indicators to understand how we're doing on affordable housing and local agriculture?
Maybe
how can we improve?
Yeah, maybe I'll speak to that quickly. I think that one of the things that was definitely pointed out in both the presentations by Justin and Josh is that there's quite a bit of subtlety to these. And so maybe just the indicator that is the one piece of data that we're able to measure just due to the capacity of and the scope of the National Climate League report. It's really important to get that data that we are getting, but there is a lot of subtlety. So I think it's really important to be incorporating these types of these indicators and these types of considerations in when we are having climate discussions within your, with your within your neighborhood, within your city. And I think really thinking about bringing together groups of citizens, if your city is ready for a climate hub, like the ones that we host at Climate Reality and support, or if you're just thinking about your different groups. But I think really thinking about how these types of indicators and how these types of things that all fit within the kind of climate picture can really be thought of more holistically, and making sure you learn the different impacts of this type of indicator, both, and so I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but I think just really it's important to think about your very local context and be learning as much as you can about where that sits locally and how other ways that impacts the local climate and your local community. So I think that's sort of what I would say to that one. I don't know if Josh or Justin have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can speak real quickly about that. I think exactly, Brenna, what you were saying is, I think indicators are a really important tool, but it's really hard, especially with something like affordable housing, where there are just so many metrics that impact affordable housing. So it's really, really important, like I was saying, to make sure you are collaborating when you're actually hoping to do some research. Once you start going into these silos of doing this work and saying, well, this is what's important about affordable housing, you really do miss a lot of things. And so the more you can start to bring more people involved with any issue, affordable housing being one of them, but I would say across the spectrum, the more people you bring in to that conversation, the richer the dialogue becomes, and the more metrics that you start to bring into it. And then you're just sort of balancing between complexity and what kind of solutions can address these kind of things. So yeah, I think bang on, Brenna, for sure.
Okay, I'll sit there. I'm gonna have one more in the chat there, but I'm gonna give one to Kurt first, just about the new incentives that we have for EVs and e-bikes purchasing. What kind of long-term changes are you expecting to see there?
Yeah, so those are very new, and we're very excited that we've had that announcement about rebates. We know that that's one of the main hurdles. We've always known that one of the top hurdles has always been that initial price. So these rebates, I think, will really help more people be able to justify that little bit. And that difference between an electric vehicle and a comparable gas vehicle, even at the sticker price, that's shrinking already. So right now, if you're looking at a new vehicle and you get the $5,000 federal incentive plus the $3,000 provincial incentive, that's $8,000 off of what is about a $10,000 ish gap anyways. So you're really close to even straight out the door. So and it's all benefits after that. So it should really help. We're really hoping that the budget that they set aside for this gets all used up quickly and that they replenish it.
Mhm. Does it apply to businesses as well, or just individuals? Do you know that?
No, it does. I forget the exact details, but it
Okay.
does. Yep.
That's great.
On my slide that I went through super quickly, there's a link
Mhm.
for more info on that, and I will share
Okay.
the slides so you can find out there.
Great. Okay, this one's back to Josh. Just Camilla is asking a question I have too. I would love to hear more about the no-till alternatives for farming. So just kind of basically when you're looking at conventional versus a no-till farm, what are the changes people have to make?
Well, it's right now, most of the no-till farming that's happening right now is really, I don't want to sound so doom and gloom, but it's really, it depends on one real important key, and that's glyphosate. But it is doing great work in Australia. I know lots of farmers there through my travels that are doing great things for their soils in Australia, and I challenge them on what happens to your system when you no longer can use Roundup, which is glyphosate. And they're like, well, that's not going to happen. So, I mean, so that's one kind of no-till alternative, and it has been great. It's been good for Australia. It's been good for our prairies because it's reducing tillage. It's like basically you just go in with these new machines and you just put the seed right into the ground. There's no disking, there's no harrowing, there's no, dust storms. Like it's really held the soil in place and organic matter is growing. But, it's just really, unfortunately reliant on that one chemical and that one company. Not anymore. Now there's generic Roundup. And then in terms of vegetable, they're doing some really great work at a place called Rodale Institute with no-till vegetables, like using equipment to kill the cover crop that you plant. Unfortunately, in our area, it's really difficult because we're just a little bit too cold. And so in order to grow the plant to a maturity level that you can kill it mechanically, it's too late in the season. It would be into July. And so our season is too condensed and our soils are too cold, because here it is March, we want to start planting in a month and it's minus crazy below out there. And so it's really tough to implement those technologies. I have tried numerous times with numerous failures to try to do no-till, and it's and it's been some success, but again, the most successful ones is around the use of Roundup. So I mean, we're still trying, we're reducing our tillage as much as we can, but that's a poor excuse, really. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what no-till is. Non-disturbance is another way of using it, but it's just really about not disturbing that soil so that the biology can stay intact. Thank you.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't know there's a specific machine to use to avoid that. That's helpful. Thanks. Okay. Got a couple for Justin here. Let's see. I guess I'm thinking about defining affordable housing. Is it well defined or not? Because to me, it seems to be always changing. It seems to be relative to market, and it's different for everyone that's looking to house themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the really difficult things that's happening across the world, and it's very funny because there's all these different metrics in terms of defining what it means to be considered in affordable housing conditions. Are you looking at low income after market? Are you looking at low income cutoff lists? Canada was like, well, fix it by doing the breadbasket market. So now we just have another one that we're measuring by. So there's quite a few different ways to actually measure. We can get into the weeds of how that actually looks like. I would say the practical answer to that is be critical of what it is that your region or your municipality is using to do that measurement, but reflect your data to be responsive to that, because it's probably going to be the way that you can communicate best with your decision makers, with your policy drivers, all of those kind of things. But that's not to say that there's no opportunity to then question how that measurement is actually applied and whether there could be a better one. So you kind of have to balance between taking a look at how we do it as well as actually using that metric.
Okay, thank you. I'm thinking with our timing, Brenda, maybe one more. Does that sound good? Yeah, okay. A question on collecting data. I guess this one's at you, Brenna. For municipalities to give data, is it just cities, or can we be asking everyone? Can towns participate? And a follow-up to the B Corp company.
Sorry, I missed the very last part, but
Okay.
Absolutely towns can participate. I think communities and cities of any size, so anyone that, yeah, any size. And I think I did just write a maybe long-winded message in the chat about this, but I think that we're definitely missing some in smaller cities to be able to share that amongst smaller cities and towns. Especially, there's a lot of collaboration and sharing that happens in Atlantic Canada anyway. So being able to bring out some of those stories in smaller cities. So there was a mention that there are quite a few people from Hampton. So somewhere like Hampton was really wanting to engage and think about doing a little bit more of this and potentially starting a hub. It would be really great to be able to share some things that are going on in Hampton, or things that, say, if a hub did get started, different challenges that they encounter because they might be a smaller municipality, and really sharing that between different small towns and communities, I think is really powerful, because a lot of things that apply in Toronto and Montreal or even in Halifax don't necessarily apply in smaller communities. And I think it's all really important to have everyone really being able to take action. So yeah, I didn't hear what you said about B Corp, so.
Yeah, it was just defining what is that? What's a B Corp company?
I'm not sure if I know the definition off the top of my head. Are you still right there, Matthew? I think you might be able to feel that off quite quickly.
Yeah, hello. So it's an international standard by which companies adhere to a number of social and environmental criteria. They have to essentially guarantee that they are valuing the triple bottom line. And you can find more on bcorp.org.com. There are relatively few in Canada. It's a movement started in the United States, but they come and certify your company. So like an organic certification for a farm, they will show up and kind of certify you B Corp after looking through your books and things like that.
Great. Okay. So I don't know if was that the last question you had planned to ask, Laura?
Yeah, I think we're good for time, and we got through most of it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I just want to thank everyone for coming, and it was really great. Thanks again to Kurt, Justin, and Josh, as well as Laura Myers, who was really doing some of putting the links in the chat and managing the chat, and Laura White for helping out with the Q&A. So that was really great to have both of you supporting getting this together as well. And so just one other thing that I wanted to mention, as I said at the beginning, I'm the regional organizer for the Community Climate Hub Initiative for Atlantic Canada. And so you'll see that we don't have too many hubs listed here on the list as of yet, but it would be really great to be able to have some groups come together and work on climate action at the municipal scale in Atlantic Canada. So if you are interested in that or want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me as well as, or sign up for the Hub Initiative. However, if you're in the space that's not really ready for that yet, there's also lots of different resources that are available on the Climate Hub website, in addition to the NCL benchmarking report that we spoke mostly about today. So feel free to definitely check those out at climatehub.ca. I believe we just dropped the link in the chat there. So so the NCL report is only one of the things that we have. That was a feature of today, but there's lots of other resources and ways to think about how you can kind of tackle municipal climate action that are also available. So I just wanted to, with that, just thank everyone for joining us, and hope to be collaborating and working on solving these issues with all of you again soon.
Bye-bye, everyone.